Thank you for tuning in to episode 10 of the NC Chambers podcast, Relaunching North Carolina, Perspectives from NC Business Leaders. The goal of this series is to make sure we're capturing and amplifying the voice of the business community as we move forward with reopening our state's economy and getting folks back to work. Today, we're honored to have with us Alan Robertson, managing partner for North Carolina law firm Robinson Bradshaw. He is consistently recognized as a public finance lawyer of regional and national distinction. Alan has extensive experience in North Carolina Medical Care Commission bond financings and is particularly known for his work with nonprofit healthcare providers, including leading health systems, community hospitals, and senior living facilities. Alan, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm glad to be with you.
So first off, I would love to hear you describe in your own words what your ties to the North Carolina business community are.
Well, my ties to North Carolina are deep since I was born in Iredell County and grew up there, went to UNC and Harvard Law School, and then came to Charlotte in 1988, spent a year clerking for Judge McMillan in the federal court, and started here at Robinson Bradshaw in 1989. So this was home, always been home, and only a few years outside the state. But now, having been here at 31 years practicing at Robinson Bradshaw, that's given me the opportunity over all these years to work with lots of business leaders across the state, our clients in particular. And most of what I've done in the last 25 years has really been focused on nonprofit healthcare. So I've had the opportunity to work with the leaders of our sort of largest health systems in the state and community hospitals and retirement communities and others in the nonprofit healthcare world. So that's been a great opportunity to work with our clients and business leaders who span across our clients.
Definitely. And I mean, you talk about a fascinating and also busy time to be involved with the healthcare community. That's, definitely a testament to your fortitude and your patience and what you bring to your overall organization. I was looking at your website earlier and noticed that you have more than 145 attorneys across 45 practice areas. So that's impressive and no doubt a great deal to manage since you are managing partner at Robinson Bradshaw. So we're definitely glad that you've decided to come back home to North Carolina and appreciate all that you've been doing during this pandemic as you consult with our healthcare communities. And so let's get right to that then. Let's talk about COVID-19 and how it has personally impacted you, whether that's from a physical standpoint, a diagnosis standpoint, or whether it's just in terms of the connections that you'd like to be able to reach out to but might not be able to right now.
Yeah, it's been fortunate just on a personal level for my family, wife and 3 sons. We've all been sort of safe and healthy so far, which has been great. And for the firm, we have about 240 total employees and 500 or 600 other dependents of our employees. And again, we've just had very few cases among our employees and dependents, and the few that we've had, happily, they've been mild. So we've been very fortunate on the virus itself. But in terms of the personal impact, starting on Thursday, March 12th, it's easy to pinpoint the day, and I would say going over till June 8th, it has been like a continuous fire drill during that period and those first few months, up very early, very, very early in the morning, late nights, weekends, as we were just required to react almost on a daily basis, as everyone was. New policies, new procedures, the next communication to all our employees to tell them what was going on. So it really was a continuous seeming fire drill. We, on June 8th, implemented our reopening the workplace plan. We never forced all of our lawyers and staff out of the office. We did not literally order everybody out. Mm-hmm. But on Tuesday, March 17th, we strongly encouraged everybody out, and we had probably 90% of our employees out starting on Tuesday, March 17th. So we got our numbers down, and we're happy with that. And what we did in early June was after weeks of surveying our lawyers and staff and, working on plans and procedures and policies and talking with others, basically said, okay, if you want to come back to work on some regular basis, you are welcome to do that. You're not required to do it. So we didn't order people back in either. So when we got to that point on June 8th, things seemed to begin to settle down. So really over the last couple of months, we've been more of a routine where we've been able to give our lawyers and our staff that sort of choice. Do they want to come in the office some? Do they want to work remotely? Whatever works best for them. So it has settled down a bit over the last 2 months. But those first almost 3 months, were just an intense period of, and for us as lawyers, reacting to new laws coming out of Congress, new regulations and guidelines, advising clients about that all on an emergency basis, whether it was employers trying to figure out the provisions of the CARES Act or businesses trying to apply for PPP loans. It was really a frantic period through March and April. Happily not because of the virus itself, but just its impacts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I cannot imagine the inundation of work that was suddenly there. And not only do you have to respond to it, but there's that knowledge that, like you said, a lot of research and a lot of learning that has to go along with that so that you can properly advise your clients and those who need you. So absolutely, I'm sure it was frantic. You mentioned earlier that you're not only do you have this immense tenure at Robinson Bradshaw, but the work that you do also connects you to so many business leaders across our state. And I'm just sort of wondering, in your conversations with them, what are they saying about this? How are they looking at this situation at this point in time?
Yeah. So again, a lot of the folks that I was talking to on a daily basis, are, for example, CFOs of the major health systems in particular, and the in-house counsel at the major health systems, and, hearing their perspectives, some of which were almost scary in late March and early April about what we might be facing. It was interesting to see. And simultaneously, I do a lot of bond financing work for these systems, and interest rates, of course, went to the floor.
Yeah.
So another part of things being frantic in March, April, May was the tremendous opportunity to finance or refinance at extremely attractive interest rates. So that added another layer of sort of urgency to that period. But coming back to, I think what I was feeling, what I was hearing, again, was, of course, folks were just trying to make sense of the pandemic and what it was going to do to the economy and everybody's businesses early on. And of course, the first move, I think, for most everybody was to analogize to the Great Recession in 08, 09. Right? That was our most recent severe experience. And so it was pretty easy to head in that direction and to start maybe acting on that. Lots of law firms around the country, some in North Carolina and around the country, began to lay off lawyers or staff or reduce salaries in March and April. We decided to hold off and to, take more of a wait and see approach. And happily, by the end of April, we were able to see things were stable enough that we didn't end up needing to lay off anybody or reduce salaries. But I think that was what we were all in that Great Recession mindset. So initially it was, hey, we got to react just like we did then. Then, of course, it moved to people were thinking about, okay, it's going to be a V-shaped recovery, right? So I think everybody was saying, okay, this is going to be really deep. It's going to cut deep for the second quarter. But then the economy is going to really rebound in the second half of the year. Obviously, that's not turned out to be the case, and there's talks now about it being a W-shaped recovery. You might bounce back, go back down if there's a second wave this fall, come back up again. And I think now, as we sit here, I think everybody's having to really accept that we're going to be in what I've been calling COVID-19 purgatory for a lot longer than any of us wanted. And now we really have to figure out, how do you operate your business while in COVID-19 purgatory until we can come out on the other side? So how do you settle into some routine that isn't normal, but is as good as you can make it for your business and your employees, in this period, which now looks like, right, it's going to extend, no one knows, but through the end of this year into next year, it's really hard to say.
It's so hard to say.
So I think everybody's now in that mode of probably a frustrated acceptance of where we are and thinking about, how do you keep your business going and ideally growing, during this period.
Right. I think that's the perfect phrase for it. Frustrating acceptance. I like that a lot. So we'll get into, in just a minute, I'd like to pick your brain a little bit more about, ways that people can navigate this uncertainty in this very tenuous time. But before we get to that, I wanted to sort of get your evaluation of how we're doing as a state in terms of our overall response to COVID-19 and whether you think that there's anything that should be done differently at this point in time.
Yeah, as I mentioned, just because of my daily work on the client front, I have the opportunity to talk with folks at the major health systems over the last few months, and I know in my conversations with them that they felt strongly that the state needed to take the steps that it took, the stay-at-home order initially, and then this phased approach to try to keep the health systems from being overwhelmed and to sort of do the things we needed to do for the overall health of our people in the state. And for me, generally, I think our state and local leaders and our public health officials have done a good job. For me, at the end of the day, the real response to all this is in our hands. It's in the hands of all of us, North Carolina businesses, our employees, really all the citizens of the state. Business leaders, our job, we've got to make sure that our companies are putting in place all the reasonable policies and procedures that we can come up with to try to get our workplaces reopened to the greatest extent possible as soon as we can, while at the same time keeping our employees safe and healthy. Right. So that's our obligation. And as leaders, we've got to be setting an example, encouraging all of our employees and to encourage them to encourage their families to be responsible citizens who practice the 3 W's. It's going to take that concerted action across all of North Carolina citizens to get the spread of this virus under control as fast as we can and let us get our economy reopened as soon as we can and as much as we can. So the government, I think, in many ways has done a pretty good job, but it's going to take individual responsibility from all of us to really get this under control. And business leaders, we have the opportunity with all of our employees to set the tone, to adopt the policies and procedures, to make the case to our employees, and hopefully have them and all their families be the responsible citizens that we all need to be at this point.
Right. Yeah, you make a great point, with the role of businesses being such that, they not only need to take care of their employees and make sure that they have environments where they can work safely, but also play this educator piece, play this educator role where they are making sure that their employees understand the 3 W's and the proper protocols that can help us get through this. You're right. That positions the business community really uniquely, I think, to take a leadership role here. And speaking of the business side of things, as someone who has this massive amount of experience in a leadership role, what sort of advice could you share with other leaders who might not have as many years under their belt or might be struggling to handle all this uncertainty right now? Are there any pieces of advice or tactics that you would be able to throw their way?
Yeah, for me, I think crises present opportunities. And so this crisis, unprecedented, none of us knew exactly how to respond or how to deal with it. It gives you a chance, if you have a culture to your business, things you believe in, this is a chance to make that shine. So that's what we did. We saw the pandemic and what was going to happen as a test for our culture, which we've been building over the last 60 years, and that if we really did the right things now, we would get even greater buy-in from our employees for the future when we all hope things return to normal. They'll remember back to these times. And it's actually can be a win for us to go through this together. And so we had to talk about, how do you act in this period? And that's why I'm saying, like, the Great Recession we now know, I think, is different, but do you pull back on things? We didn't pull back. We decided to lean in. We'd been working for a year to do a conversion of our accounting and billing software, and we were going to have to go dark for several weeks in April with no ability to enter time or send out bills. And to do that in April seemed like potentially a pretty scary time to do that. But we quickly made the decision that we were going to push forward. We really needed all of our lawyers and our staff to get trained on that new system and ask questions and learn how to do it. And we thought, well, if work slows down a little bit in April, that'll be a perfect time to do this conversion, actually better than it would have done. Mm-hmm. So we did push forward with it. It worked well. We had just hired some new partners in the Triangle, and we were planning to open a Raleigh office. Did we keep going with that, or do we stop? Well, we said we're going to keep going, so it's going to open next month. We ran our summer associate program with 14 law students on a virtual basis and kept that going. Our 7 new lawyers are starting next month. So we felt like that sort of leaning into it in a way would say a lot to our people, and it'll be something they'll remember in the future. So I think seeing the crisis presented by the pandemic as an opportunity for the business to build those bonds of loyalty is something to actually take advantage of. Specifically, I think, though, in this environment, everyone needs to be focused on the well-being of their employees. And for me, one of the things is communication. That's what I was talking about, that fire drill that seemed like every day starting in March, is that over-communicating. You felt like you were over-communicating. There were so many emails to all employees or all lawyers or the staff or whatever to tell them. And I gave out, frankly, more financial information, internal financial information, than I would typically do, trying to be more transparent. The absence of knowing how the firm was doing, or whether we were doing well enough, or whether some axe was going to fall, was much more likely to be debilitating and, hurt morale and productivity and all those things. And so any concerns about, we're a private business, we're not a public company, but we're a private business, but sharing that information more than we might have in that period seemed critical, so that employees could know where we stand, and know where they stand. There are other things, like, just again with well-being, you'll have social scientists and others, psychologists, whatever, talk about things like predictability, control, connection. Those are things that really enhance well-being for your employees. So predictability means regularity. So whether that means for team members on particular teams that they'll have a regular weekly call, so they have to get ready for the weekly call every week at 9 a.m. or whatever it is, that helps things feel more normal, right? And predictable, which helps people's well-being. Control, we tried to do that. Again, that's giving people choices, and that's what I meant when I said we didn't order everybody out of the office, and we didn't order on June 8th with our reopening the workplace plan, we didn't order everybody back in. We wanted to give everybody the choice and the feeling that having some choices is one way, some control of your life enhances well-being. Connection, just lots of people talked about, how do you promote in this virtual world people staying connected, calling each other on the phone, doing things. So I think leaders who can really focus on well-being, communicate, over-communicate, be transparent, focus on predictability, control, connection, those sorts of things. Again, they're going to see their folks really respond to that. And again, as we come out the other side, I think they'll find that their businesses are better for it.
Absolutely. Predictability, control, and connection. You just gave 3 really concrete ways that employers can navigate this time. And simultaneously improve employee morale, which, as you said earlier, is, one way of instilling loyalty in your team and ensuring that they stay with you over a period of time. So that's great advice. Thank you for that. Many businesses, perhaps not yours, fortunately, but many businesses are facing really sharp revenue declines as a result of the pandemic, obviously. But as we've talked about so far, it's paramount that employers always make their people and their teams a priority. So in addition to some of the mechanisms that you just described, what are some ways that employers can continue to make their people a priority, even if, the numbers and the budgets aren't exactly where they want them to be right now?
Yeah, this has been something that I've thought a lot about, and I'm really, as I became the managing partner here at Robinson Bradshaw back in September of 2015, I had heard a CEO named Bob Chapman speak a few years before that, actually here at Christ Church in Charlotte. And he's the CEO of Barry Waymiller, which is actually a manufacturing company headquartered in the Midwest. But he has a set of principles he articulates called Truly Human Leadership, and he's written a book about it. It's called Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family. And Chapman's whole thesis is that business can be the most powerful force for good in the world.
Yeah.
But for that to happen, business leaders have to see themselves as leaders, not managers, as leaders, and they have to view their leadership as stewardship, and as really an awesome responsibility for the lives that are entrusted to them. And so his argument is that, look, if you're a business leader, your job is to help your employees realize their gifts and talents, their potential, what they can be. And so you have to demonstrate to your people that you truly care about them. And when you do that, what you find is that they're going to respond with even greater loyalty, greater productivity, and that approach of caring for your people is not only the right thing to do, but it's actually good business.
Right.
It makes your business more profitable. So Chapman's example, in the Great Recession in 08-09, lots of companies were laying off people, cutting people, doing things. And he tried a different approach. He went to their thousands of employees in this manufacturing business and basically said, look, if we can share some sacrifice together, what we need is everybody will take, 1 month of unpaid leave. Mm-hmm. So almost a furlough type approach. We think we can avoid laying off anybody, so that everybody will have some of the pain, but we'll get through this together. And that's what they did. And they were able to navigate the Great Recession without ultimately cutting people. And they had employees volunteer and say, look, this other employee I know needs the money. I'll take 2 months off so they can have 0 months off. And they had people start to make those kinds of offers. Right. So I guess for me, all that says, and this is what I was coming into it in March and April, about why we weren't willing to take any steps to lay anybody off or cut anybody's salary right away until we could sort of get our footing a little bit, because and if we had even started to head down that path, I would have been thinking about, can we come up with some creative ideas or some different ways to do things? And right. I guess that's what I would encourage, folks, if they're suffering declining revenues, budgets aren't where they need to be. It may be there's literally no choice but to have some layoffs or do some things, but there may be creative possibilities if you communicate out to your people, explain, be transparent, what's going on with the business, what do we need to do to get through this together. You may just find that your people will respond to that, and they'll be willing to share those sacrifices, make shared sacrifices in order to keep the business together until we can come through this on the other side. So I encourage folks to look at Chapman's book and read that and think about that. But I think he's dead on that. This approach of as he says, of realizing you've got 40 hours a week or more with your employees, and what you do with that and how you influence them has this incredible influence on their lives and their families and just the ripple effect it can have. So again, if this crisis can be an opportunity for businesses and business leaders to actually shine and do things that will pay dividends.
Thank you so much for sharing that resource. That sounds like an excellent book. And before we wrap up today, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share any parting words or final comments with our audience.
Yeah, obviously COVID-19 is extraordinary for all of us. None of us really have experience in figuring out how to navigate this, but it's clear that we're going to have to do it together in each of our own businesses and together as citizens of North Carolina. And that's what we need to do. Look out for each other, protect each other, care for each other. And if we do that, we will get through it as a state. And I hope our businesses will all survive and thrive.
Alan, it sounds like you're doing a great job of putting into practice that stewardship that you just talked about, and we appreciate your work on behalf of North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Alan Robertson, Managing Partner at Robinson Bradshaw. Alan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you again, Emmy. I enjoyed it.